this episode of China Unscripted, will China pressure Elon Musk over Twitter? Is Beijing going under lockdown? And when will Americans get it on China? Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Ganesha.
And it's just going to be us today. So, we'll have some thrilling conversations about all things China. And of course, the big story this week has been...
You're finally back?
Yes, I am back. I wasn't going to say that.
Okay.
But...
I thought that's where you were going.
No,
That's the big story for me, Chris.
That's the big story for me, too.
Yeah, what was it like hosting the shows for about 2 weeks between the two of you guys?
Exhausting?
Yeah, it was actually really hard.
Exhausting, I think is the word.
So does that mean you guys are no longer going to try to undermine and overthrow me?
Yeah, my 7-year plan to undermine you, that's totally out the window now.
I never tried to undermine or overthrow you.
Oh, you knew.
Oh, about what?
That it's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. No, I have no illusions about that. The last episode I recorded, because of where the camera was, the stool had to be really high since I'm much shorter than you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to record this episode as I'm slowly falling off the front of the stool.
Oh, gosh.
That was fun.
Yes, despite what you may see right now that Shelley and I are kind of a similar height, that's just magic. My chair is so much lower. Also, I have a short torso. My height is mostly in my legs. It makes squats difficult, but deadlifts easy.
Interesting.
So, China news.
Yes, the big news this week, I bought Twitter.
Okay.
Yep.
You, with Elon Musk as your front man, bought Twitter.
Well, have you ever seen the two of us in the same room at the same time?
No, I have to say I have never seen the two of you in the same. Yeah.
Who knows what that could mean? That's all I'm saying.
Though we're not famous enough to hang out with Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's probably it. Yes, Elon Musk has bought Twitter. Do you think that will make it more or less of a dumpster fire?
I feel like there's no way, but it's such a dumpster fire.
At least in the short term, it has become more of a dumpster fire. Twitter has been awful this week.
It's Twitter's been going downhill for a little while. And I think...
Years.
Yeah, but this is the second big shift. There was a big shift after Donald Trump was kicked off, and a lot of people in that camp left Twitter.
No, there's a big shift. This is the fifth big shift.
Okay, but then
Shelley is the Twitter expert.
This is people now on the other side. They're like, oh, I'm going to leave Twitter now that Elon Musk is, because people think
Are they going to? Because that's I feel like it's kind of the whole, people are going to move to Canada if Donald Trump won.
Didn't Miley Cyrus say that? Did she ever move to Canada?
I don't know if anybody who said they wanted to move to Canada moved to Canada.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear about any Canadian border crisis, at least. But I remember back in the day, Twitter was you could have nice conversations with people. You know what I mean?
This must have been before I was on Twitter.
Yeah, you could have, you felt like it was a collegiate, especially because I was doing mostly China watcher Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I felt like it was really friendly. And you could, connect with people and
who had similar interests.
Yeah, and then you could both make fun of Xi Jinping together and all this stuff. And it was nice. And then it just started to factionalize everything else.
Echo chamber.
Everything else on Twitter. The people started to get mad at each other for different things. And then, people would have long Twitter rants about other people. And then people started subtweeting other people. And it just became so terrible that I was like, I can't really be on Twitter anymore.
Yeah, it's if you have a difference of opinion, it's because the other person must be evil at this point.
It's why do we think that it's okay to have a conversation in a certain way on Twitter that we would never have with other human beings face to face?
You're right. I need to make my everyday conversations more like Twitter.
That's not what I meant.
Well, Matt, if that's not what you meant, you should set it more clearly.
Yeah, Matt, you far-right fascist, racist piece of garbage. Blocked.
No, Matt, on Twitter, you only can cry on the inside. No. Yeah, it's just, it's so... I basically also noticed myself getting angrier being on Twitter. Did you notice this? That where you kind of react.
Oh, Shelley. I'm always angry.
Oh, yes. There you go. But yeah, you kind of react, or it basically encourages you to be especially snarky or something like that, to have an attitude, that's what gets likes and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's the thing about the internet, I feel like, as promises like, hey, you can communicate with anyone, anywhere in the world. It'll bring humanity together, blah, blah, blah. Really, it just seems to make us all worse. Except for me.
It was so bad. Now I mostly just retweet other people because I'm like, well, I got to be on Twitter to find some things, right? To see some news.
Yeah. Well, it's been very valuable. Like, for example, with the recent lockdown in Shanghai, like a lot of footage from what's going on inside of China, like you can get it on Twitter.
Yeah, because I am not installing WeChat on my phone.
No.
But yeah, so there's advantages to it. But I think if you spend too long on it, it basically makes your life so much worse.
In a way, it's like a gremlin. It's nice and cuddly and cute at first, but then you start to feed it too much. It gets wet, and then it becomes a horrible monster that just keeps expanding. I just watched Gremlins 2 for the first time recently, so it's on my mind.
Okay.
Fantastic movie.
I've never watched any of the
10
Gremlins
out of 10.
movies.
Cannot recommend it enough.
Okay. Yeah. That's what you did when you were on your time off, right?
I watched Gremlins 2,
Yeah.
and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Well, so do you think Elon Musk will make it better? Like, I kind of see, like, there's basically two camps, like people who are like, oh, yeah, Elon Musk is going to, make it a free speech platform again, or people saying, like, oh, this is, racist white power, alt-right, blah,
Of
blah,
course,
blah, blah.
those are the only two answers.
Yeah, it seems that way. But it seems to me like we have no idea how he's going to operate.
He hasn't
Twitter.
even bought it yet, technically. Like, it hasn't happened. It's going to take months.
And it's like everyone has such a strong opinion when it's like, really, like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. Who knows what it'll be like.
The internet doesn't like to wait and see. The internet likes to jump to
react
conclusions.
immediately. Yeah, exactly
They're
what
all a
Twitter
bunch
is
of reactionaries.
Yeah, I remember, for example, when that video of what was that Catholic school?
Covington Catholic.
Yes. Like that video was on Twitter, and there's somebody I follow who's a China journalist retweeted it and was like, this is outrageous. And I was going to retweet it. And then I was like, wait a minute. So I stopped myself and I was like, I actually don't know what's going on in this video. It starts in the middle. And I just didn't do anything about it. And then later I was like, oh, well, I mean.
It ended up being
Yeah.
something much different.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's very, even some of the Shanghai videos that were coming out, there were a couple where I put something in the, like one of our episodes, because I was like, oh, I think this has been validated. Like I saw it in several different sources, but a lot of these videos, you can't find the original context. So you kind of have to like try to find as many people confirming that this is the original context as possible. And in a couple of those cases, it was not true.
Like there was the one where someone was like, this is footage of people in Shanghai committing suicide under lockdown. It's like a bunch of clips of people jumping off buildings. And it was just a collection of suicide videos. It had nothing to do with the Shanghai lockdown. First of all, it's a little disturbing that someone has collected a collection of suicide videos of people, What do you do in your free time?
Not that, apparently.
Oh.
But yeah, or there was a video I found of somebody just losing it and kind of calmly smashing every single window of the security guards, like little booth outside his apartment building because they wouldn't let him in. And it turned out to not be from Shanghai. It was from another city. And so it was just like, you think this is what you're seeing, but you can't necessarily be 100% sure this is what the context is. It's a little tricky.
Yeah. And it's going to be crazy, like 5 to 10 years from now when the technology to do deep fakes is extremely user-friendly. Like you can already do deep fakes that are very convincing. But, and like there's apps that have, kind of like funny deep fake things you can use to like make, I saw this video, like Xi Jinping singing like a pop song, but like you can tell it's fake.
At some point, people on Twitter kept sending me, a lot of Indians on Twitter kept sending me deep fakes of Xi Jinping's face on like attractive Bollywood dancer girls in movies. Like they would just put Xi Jinping's face on all of the dancers.
But like, so the people who are doing this are not like technically skilled people necessarily. There is software that allows you to do that,
Yes.
right? So imagine 5 to 10 years from now, it's like 2030, and there are apps that make basically any type of deep fake extremely easy. And then there's going to be like no way to validate anything. And then people are going to call on Twitter to try to verify whether videos are real.
Do you think Twitter's going to be around in 2040 or whatever?
I said 2030.
Oh.
I don't know. Right? I mean,
well, the Biden administration is starting a new campaign against misinformation, completely unrelated to anything else that is happening on the internet right now.
Yeah, it's hard to say what the future of social media is going to be, because remember how quickly MySpace lost everything.
Oh, sorry, what?
MySpace?
Friendster.
Yeah, top 8 spaces.
I never got past LiveJournal.
Ah, got it. Well, so like the point is, and if Elon Musk loses Twitter, like it's only $40 billion. Like he's worth over $270 billion. So it's not like that big a deal to him. But the internet is going to be an increasingly challenging place to operate if people are still on their worst behavior. And I feel like the onus has to be on us to be on our best behavior, or even if not our best behavior, just like a normal human behavior.
Our best behavior.
Am I too idealistic to say
I need
that?
to pick up on that.
No.
Like, can't we just treat each other as people? And like, if you say something mean in the heat of passion, like apologize. Like, just like, why can't I don't know how the internet works, do I?
No. Well, if it makes you feel better, Matt, probably by the time 2030 rolls around, the global famine caused by the food shortages from the Russia-Ukraine war will have wiped out most of the population, and we'll be more concerned about fighting off the cannibal tribes than arguing on Twitter.
Well, they're not going to be cannibal tribes because there's going to be plenty of bugs to eat.
I really don't like where this is going.
And we've also
The conversation or human history?
The conversation.
Well, you should be concerned about human history because it's not looking good.
Well, okay.
I see a bright future for humanity. Just that's my perspective.
On Elon Musk's Mars base.
No, just I feel like at some point people are going to be like, wow, all the social media stuff and a bunch of other things are kind of turning us rotten, and let's just go back to being good to each other again.
But how will we dismantle systems of oppression?
Okay. I'm done. I'm done.
So, but we wanted to tie this back into China, right?
Well, here's the thing. I thought the Elon Musk China guy was a deepfake at first.
Oh yeah, I think like we'll throw a video of that guy up on screen.
Yeah.
And that was
the first few videos I saw of him. I'm like, is this a deepfake?
But no, it's like he's just China's Elon Musk, which makes me. This is something like I've always wondered, like how many different faces are there in the world? Like how many people would look like the three of us? How many Chris Chappell lookalikes are there?
There is something about this where people have used the internet to find people who are not twins but twins, like people who look really, really similar to each other, but they're not actually direct blood relatives.
There are definitely people who think that they've seen me and didn't see me. Like they saw someone else that looked like me.
That could also be just a facial recognition problem.
Yeah, I mean, but what's interesting with the Elon Musk lookalike is he's a Chinese guy, and Elon Musk is not Chinese, and so
he's African American.
Yes, he's a white African American. But like it just goes to show,
why do you have to bring white and race into it?
Well, it's because it shows how little difference there is between the people of the world.
I like that.
Like we're all kind of the same, and the race stuff is very emphasized, but like it's not that big of a thing, and you can look alike across different races, and like we're also kind of all the same on the inside.
When did Matt become the voice of like hope and optimism on the show?
I have been away for too long.
Apparently, Chris and I need to get off Twitter. Because you don't really use it.
I've almost completely stopped using Twitter.
Yeah.
Because every time I go on Twitter, like I just feel this anger on my screen, and I don't like that feeling.
That really is the dividing line between the three of us. So heavy social media users, the man who is optimistic and happy.
Well, I actually, like I said, I've cut down a lot. A few months ago, I bumped into another China journalist at the Oslo Freedom Forum, and she asked me how I was, which was, first of all, I was like, somebody's asking me how I am. Like, this is weird. And then I was like, oh, actually, I've stopped using Twitter. I've really cut down on my Twitter usage. It's made my life so much better. And she was like, oh, me too. And then we just bonded over, like, essentially quitting China Twitter.
Wow.
Yeah.
And also, that was a face-to-face conversation. Those are rare.
Yeah.
Especially after COVID.
I was also kind of weirdly nervous about it.
Oh, I've heard that is like a thing that, like, after people have been under like lockdown for so long, people have had more social anxiety about like kind of getting back, like talking to people.
Yeah, that was the first big event I went to post-COVID, essentially.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, fortunately for me, I never talk to people. I just talk at people. So it hasn't really affected me.
Mm. Well, good for you.
What? I wasn't paying attention to you.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But I was praising you. Didn't you hear those parts?
Those, everything in life has like a pro and a con. Like the con is that I don't hear the praise.
Mm.
So Elon Musk and Twitter and China.
Mm-hmm. I was waiting to get there.
Yeah, we really went off tangent like right away.
Yeah.
Welcome to China Unscripted.
That's right. Well, so yeah, the big controversy was like, there's been a million controversies, but like one of the attacks on Elon Musk buying Twitter, other than like it's, a sign of white power, or he's gonna,
ruin it by making it transparent.
Or that like, what if he uses it to like censor politicians on one side of the aisle?
Or uses it to secretly find out information that's in your DMs.
I thought he was gonna, but he's like announced he wants to like do encryption like Signal for DM.
I mean, I'm not saying that the person who said this on Twitter was well informed.
Well,
at all.
Speaking of ill-informed people on Twitter, Jeff Bezos was one of the loudest voices saying that, hey, what, Elon Musk has ties to China. What does his purchase of Twitter mean? Maybe he said.
His tweet was more like, his tweet was more asking a question about it.
And then it was like all the media said, like using that as the hook to be like, Jeff Bezos questions Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah, I definitely saw it was like Jeff Bezos trolls Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. Like, yeah.
Which is ridiculous for many reasons. One, like, no one, like, the connections that guy has to China, Jeff Bezos, that is, and the shady things he's done, tower above
just having a Tesla factory and Tesla showrooms in Xinjiang and all. I mean, it's not good what Elon Musk is doing in China.
And that is the thing. Like, we should be concerned that all the billionaires have ties to China.
And Elon Musk has also, praised China's economy and
for the 100-year anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, he praised China's economic development and said, hey, everyone should come and check it out for themselves. And I think this was during COVID.
Oh, the 100th anniversary was in
2021.
No, 2021.
2021. Oh, right. And so like that's even makes less sense. Like, how could anyone travel to China to see the prosperity? But Elon Musk definitely has a problematic relationship with China.
Yeah.
He's not unique in that.
No. I mean, Jeff Bezos, Amazon's done a bunch of shady.
Mm-hmm. That wasn't a swear. That was a mispronunciation.
I actually meant to say shady.
Mm-hmm. Let me apologize to all the children, the little children watching this Talking Heads show about China politics.
Go on, Shelley.
Of course, it would be me that accidentally swears.
She's the dirty.
Like, remember that time in the Hong Kong live stream?
Yes, I said the F word accidentally. We were under a lot of pressure.
And yet I manage not to swear.
That's why you're the person on the show, and I'm usually not.
Yeah. I remember my mom watched the live stream, the one that you swore in.
Oh.
Yeah. She made some comment about that to me. About like, is Shelley supposed to swear?
That would be kind of funny, though, if I was the only one who swore.
But you are, though.
Yeah.
Twice in 8 years is hardly.
Chris and I don't have the filthy mouth that you have, Shelley.
That's right. I brush my teeth every day.
So Jeff Bezos has done a lot of shady stuff in China. Like Amazon has basically set up a special store within there to promote Chinese propaganda books, essentially. Like Xi Jinping's books, they deleted bad reviews of Xi Jinping's book on their platform. I mean, he owns the Washington Post, who for years published China Watch, that advertising insert from state-run China Daily. So hardly clean hands.
Right, but it's every billionaire basically has ties to China. If you go down the list, right, you've got Bill Gates, and not just Microsoft, which he no longer runs, but his charity stuff has a lot of vested interest in China. You've got people like Michael Dell. Dell Computers has interest in China. Phil Knight from Nike has interest in China. The Koch brother, the Koch brother singular now, has interest in China.
Did one of them die?
One of them did die.
I didn't know about that.
It's like, Michael Bloomberg, who ran for president, but also has like really heavy business interests. So it's every billionaire. And the interesting almost exception to that is Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, because Facebook was repeatedly denied China. And every time they tried to get into China, like they were denied. So it's Mark Zuckerberg who, there's a lot of reasons to criticize him, but one of them is not really deep
it's
China
not
interests.
For lack of trying. So I'm not sure.
Right. And technically, Facebook does probably get hundreds of millions of dollars a year from Chinese advertisers, because Chinese advertisers can advertise on Facebook. So if you lose that market, he does have some. But like, what's a few $1 billion when you're worth $100 billion? I don't know if it's like but
he tried to get Facebook into China for years.
Like, remember him jogging through Beijing in the smog?
Remember him asking Xi Jinping to name his daughter?
That was an alleged. Allegedly.
Remember the photo shoot where he had a copy of Xi Jinping's governance of China?
That was just there for everyone to see. Yes.
Yeah.
He was meeting with some Chinese official who was visiting Facebook headquarters, and prominently on his desk is Xi Jinping's. He was too much of a suck up.
A zuck up.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I get what Matt is saying. It's not like he has a gigafactory in China like Elon Musk does with Tesla. And the interesting thing about Tesla is like China really pursued getting Tesla in China. They gave them tax breaks. And like it was the Tesla factory was like the first wholly owned foreign company in China. Like usually there has to be like a majority share owner Chinese company.
So do you think that the Chinese Communist Party was like, you know what, we're just going to be really nice this time and just be benevolent?
They want the technology.
What you're saying that they wanted Tesla in China so that they could steal the electric car technology and then make their own Chinese electric vehicles and inundate the global market with cheaper versions in the future?
Yes.
Just a side note, those very green Teslas you're all driving to save the environment, most of those electric batteries are made by Chinese companies who power themselves with coal, ever-increasing amounts of coal, and get a lot of their resources from child slave mines in Africa. So,
yeah. Well, there are environmental problems with the batteries, that's for sure. But I think also it's like with electric cars, like it is good to have zero emissions in the cars, but they're not really zero emissions only because whatever you power the car with is where the emissions come. So if you're charging it on a nuclear power grid, then it's zero emissions, but it's a nuclear waste vehicle. If you're powering it with natural gas, then it's a, very low pollution vehicle, but you're creating groundwater pollution where the fracking happens. If it's, powered on a grid that's mainly hydropower, then it's zero emissions, but you're also like hurting the ecosystem of your local rivers. So like there's no way to have that totally clean power unless it's powered by solar and wind, which themselves have some issues. But even so, like there's no grid that is powered enough by those that everyone can charge everything on electric and solar. Like that's just not where the technology is. So like it's just my point is that while there's a lot of good ideas about electric vehicles, you have to look at the whole cycle of it.
In an effort to have my conversations in real life be more like Twitter, so you're saying you hate the environment and just want to pollute with oil, Matt? That's what you're saying?
No, I'm concerned about the environment.
Okay. So Elon Musk has Tesla factory in China.
Yes.
Technically, that factory only produces Teslas for the Chinese market.
Mm-hmm. Which is the second biggest market for Tesla.
Where their grid is largely powered by coal, just saying.
So,
but that was a good rant about the problems of green energy and stuff. I think that was.
Right, and I'm not opposed to green energy. I just think we should look at the whole picture. That'll get me blocked on Twitter, which is why I'm not on Twitter.
So I think Elon Musk is, on one hand, the question, right, is whether the Chinese Communist Party, could use Tesla as leverage against Elon Musk on Twitter, right?
If Elon Musk actually succeeds in buying Twitter, will hypothetically the Chinese Communist Party be able to? There's just so many like.
There are. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to try something, because they do care about Twitter. I mean, they put their. I don't think Elon Musk would just go around blocking Chinese state-run media reporters from being on Twitter or whatever.
I hope he wouldn't. That's some of my best entertainment.
Global Times.
Global
tweets.
Times. Oh man, follow Global Times on Twitter. It's.
Yeah. So I especially like the one where they. What was the one this week where
about romance?
Oh yeah, they tweeted about how it was trying to be a positive story about the Shanghai lockdowns, and it was like you should have more romance and imagination, inspiration in your life to get through the lockdown.
And they didn't call it lockdown. They called it, what did they call it? It was some
strict,
unprecedented static management.
Static management. Yes.
Like where do you even come up? All right.
If you. The way to do static management is to use dryer balls.
Yeah, okay.
Takes the static out of.
I get it.
Like dryer sheets.
No, I also immediately got it.
Yeah. You just didn't think it was funny, which is.
So China cares about Twitter. I'm sure it would love to be able to influence Twitter more.
Yeah. I mean, they have also jailed people for saying things on Twitter.
I remember there was a story of like a Chinese student who was studying in the U.S. and he did a tweet comparing Xi Jinping to one of the villains from Biker Mice of Mars. I'll put that side by side comparison up, and they knew he did that, and he got thrown in jail for a couple of months when he went back to China, I think. China cares about Twitter. There's also the army of like Chinese bots that will just spread Chinese propaganda. And that's something Twitter has been trying to fight.
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk, I believe, has said he will continue that. He didn't specifically say Chinese Twitter bots. But
I think he said spam bots.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think the question is, when the Chinese Communist Party tries to influence Elon Musk with respect to Twitter, what will Elon Musk's reaction be? And this is where the personality of every billionaire is different, right? Like, I think the personality of someone like Michael Bloomberg is to say, look, well, the business interests of my company, Bloomberg LP, selling terminals in China and getting Chinese data for global terminals is more important than Bloomberg News, which basically doesn't really make money. So, of course, like the calculation is make some adjustments to the news to maintain
we
the China
don't know
market.
that it went all the way up to Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah, but there was a New York Times report in 2013 that did claim that Bloomberg News was curtailing some of their China reporting. So anyway, the point is
no. That happened. I'm just saying that we don't know that it was Michael Bloomberg that made that call, right?
We don't know it was him. But I'm saying that like you have a certain personality type that is willing to make those sacrifices. You have a certain personality type like Mark Zuckerberg who's willing to jog in the pollution in Beijing, to suck up to Xi Jinping. But what's Elon Musk's personality type? And that's my question. Like, is he going to be the person who just be like, yeah, I guess Twitter's not working out, like throw it away? Because it seems like he does weird, whimsical things. And so I feel like he's much more of a wild card.
He tries to give Americans flamethrowers.
This is not a defense of Elon Musk, and it's not at all a defense of his opening up a gigafactory for Teslas in China, which is stupid. Elon Musk, if you're watching this, that was stupid. But I don't know what he would do. You know what I mean? Like he could kind of do anything that are on this range of like he could make public what the Chinese Communist Party is doing to him and just make it into a joke on Twitter. Like he's just kind of like a weird wild card like that.
Well, and that's hopefully like whatever happens, there will be accountability on Twitter of people like paying attention and calling him out if he does do something that pressures, that gives into Chinese pressure.
So,
but
who knows?
I think we should probably move on to some of our other stories because that was a lot of time on Twitter, which...
We've been spending too much time on Twitter.
We've been way too much time
on Twitter. I apologize.
It sucks you in, and you can never leave. All right, what's the next topic, Chris?
I think the next big thing is, well, as of this recording, Beijing has not gone under lockdown. However, that is the big conversation people are having. It's like they've started doing mandatory testings. In Beijing, there's been, some cases, not many, but some cases, if you believe official numbers, which none of us do. And this is how it kind of began in Shanghai. There was mandatory testing, and then we got to lock down some areas. And then we have to lock down half the city. We'll do half the city at a time. And then total lockdown, people are starving in their apartments.
Yeah, I don't think Beijing is going to follow exactly that model. I think Shanghai... Basically, the Chinese Communist Party is trying to be like, well, Beijing is the good child, if you know what I mean. Like, Beijing is better than Shanghai. It's going to do way better at the zero COVID than Shanghai did. Shanghai messed up. Yeah, that's basically there's always been this thing between Beijing and Shanghai, right? Where there's like a rivalry almost. It's like New York and Washington, D.C. or something. Like
no contest.
Well... The idea is that Beijing is more governed, right, because it's the center of political power. Shanghai had been the business center of China for decades, so it's about as quote-unquote freewheeling as you can get in China. So a lot of the criticism around the Shanghai leadership was that, they didn't lock down soon enough. Like they didn't lock down hard enough. If they had just clamped down immediately, they could have... because Shanghai is reporting hundreds of thousands of COVID cases, which is a lot for the official numbers in China. So everybody was like, people from outside Shanghai were like, if they just did it the right way, because they had tried to have their own type of lockdown where they were only locking down neighborhoods, or like they were trying to pilot this new way of doing it. They even talked about letting people quarantine at home, like all this kind of stuff. And seem to be pushing back against the zero COVID policy. And, the message from Beijing is that that's not okay. You stick to the plan.
Wait, but I don't understand how Beijing sees this now. If Shanghai has hundreds of thousands of cases and other cities have cases, the only way for Beijing to actually have zero cases is to never let anyone into Beijing again.
They could do that.
That might not be the most unappealing thing to the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, but it's crazy.
I mean, the movement, if we don't talk about just like hard lockdowns, like actually locking people inside their apartment buildings or complexes and not letting them go outside, or only restricting them to being within the complex, right? If you just talk about movement restrictions, there are, hundreds of millions of Chinese people under movement restrictions right now. Like certain areas are not going to let people in, certain areas are not going to let people out. Yeah, that's
And the Communist Party has always limited the movement of Chinese people throughout the country. Like it's not like the United States where you can just casually go from one state to another. You can't go from one province to another easily, like because there's that whole hukou system.
well, you can go there. That's not the problem, but you can't live there easily. Like if you have hukou is a ID system essentially that tells you where you're allowed to live. So if you have a rural hukou, if you have a countryside hukou, you cannot go live in a city. So, that's one of the problems with you have all these migrant workers from around the country, and they're mostly coming from the poor countryside areas. They go to the cities to work in factories, to work in construction, and they can't technically live there. So they're reduced to kind of living in the outskirts of cities in these sometimes quasi-illegal neighborhoods. Their kids can't go to school, so often they leave the kids behind in the countryside. It's like having like a kind of a legal immigrant system, but within your own country.
Yeah. And so my point is that the Communist Party does already try to control the movement of Chinese people. I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say that they would try to create a zero COVID bubble around Beijing.
It just seems like...
I mean, they did it for the Olympics.
Yeah.
And what happened in the Olympics bubble?
Everyone had a great time, and the Olympics were a model for the world.
And Putin didn't invade Ukraine until after the Olympics, so everything was good.
And how about with respect to COVID?
They had some cases, but they were basically able to keep it separate from the rest of Beijing. Like, literally, you had people, if you were going to go work at the Olympics, you needed to be quarantined for like 3 to 4 weeks before even going inside the bubble.
Right, but they still had cases in the bubble. What happened.
But, supposedly they were from people coming in from other countries to the Olympics.
Yeah, well, this is going to be an impossible situation for Beijing. And anyway, the sort of walls around the Olympics bubble were very small compared to the walls you'd need to build around Beijing. And I don't mean necessarily physical walls, but just the barriers to entry. Like Beijing is geographically very large, and there's so many roads going in and out.
Did we talk about on this? I don't think we talked about on the podcast the woman who got stuck on a bridge between Beijing and another city because both sides went into lockdown while she was driving on the bridge.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's
crazy. Yeah. Well, I mean, after many hours, she was able to get one side to let her in. But like that's the kind of weirdness of Chinese bureaucracy. Like they can lock down immediately, but then if you have a edge case or something that's an exception, they can't deal with it.
Yeah. Well, that's why like you've seen panic buying in Beijing as people, they have seen on social media in China that people in Shanghai have been starving, complaining about there's no food. And so now that's happening in China. There was that case of the Chinese state-run media reporter who tweeted a picture of herself at a supermarket and the shelves were empty, and she's like, "Oh, blah blah blah."
She's like, "I'm buying stuff. We're all getting ready for the possible lockdown."
And then that was deleted, and the next day she posted another photo of her at the supermarket, and the shelves were filled.
And she's like, food. "I just panicked. I was overthinking yesterday, right?"
Yeah, well, we'll put that up.
Yeah,
but
as a reporter, you really shouldn't be thinking very much.
Just let the Communist Party think for you. They make all the best decisions.
Well, here's the thing. I don't know how much the ordinary people in Beijing are believing the whole line about, well, we're not Shanghai, so it's gonna go great here.
Yeah. Well, because the Shanghai lockdown, despite the kind of the Beijing Shanghai kind of divide. It was shocking that happened in Shanghai. Such an economically important part of China was so completely shut down.
I mean, that's one of the reasons the Shanghai officials at first tried to argue that they didn't need to lock the city down, or they couldn't because so much of the country relies on Shanghai, right? Yeah. That was actually what they said. Like, we can't go into a lockdown right now because...
Well, and also, these are the elites, really, of Chinese society. They're not usually the ones who are getting persecuted by the party. So
I mean, there are plenty of non-elite in Shanghai.
that's
but,
true.
Yeah.
That's true. But this is one of the cases where it's like a new group of people is suffering under the Communist Party that has not.
Although
very long time.
also, it's very uneven what happened in Shanghai.
Mhm.
Like some people had food.
Yeah.
Some people couldn't get food for weeks. Like some people got, a few packages from the government. Some people got like a dozen packages from the government. So it's like it was very unevenly distributed in terms of like how people were experiencing the lockdown. Because Shanghai has 25 million people.
Something about distribution in communist societies. Anyways, go on.
But yeah, so your experience could vary a lot. And then people in Shanghai, but still, I think people in Shanghai felt like they were all in it together. And then areas outside Shanghai did the thing where they were like, oh, well, like Shanghai just messed up.
Yeah.
Like because of the way that Chinese WeChat is, it's you only see your friends' social media posts. So a lot of people in Shanghai were seeing all of the terrible things happening in Shanghai. But if you lived, somewhere else and you had no friends in Shanghai, you would not know how bad it was. Right?
That's the way like an authoritarian government maintains power, like to always be able to like marginalize a group and blame, victim blame essentially. Like, oh yeah, it's Shanghai's problem. Don't worry, Beijing will not. But if Beijing does go into a lockdown kind of like this, like that'll be huge. I mean, that now that really is the elite of Chinese society.
Oh yeah, well, I don't think in Zhongnanhai they're gonna have a problem getting food or anything, but
probably not. I'm sure Xi Jinping won't go
but
hungry.
It is true in Shanghai that a lot of people, like you're saying, Chris, experience this in a way that they never had before. The question is, when it's over, are they going to remember what happened? Are they going to kind of just rationalize it? Like, it was a hard month, but it was worth it. Or are they going to...
I feel like there's a lot of parallels between the U.S. and China and what you're just saying.
Oh.
Well, also, like, in any disaster, the wealthy fare better than the poor. But that's just a factor of having money, and that's what people do with their money. They spend it on things that buffer them from like the worst situations. But it's somewhat exacerbated in this disaster because like if you live in Shanghai, but you have like a large apartment with a balcony, you're going to have a much less bad lockdown experience than someone who's in a small like studio apartment with like 3 other people.
Yes.
Right.
Although the one thing is that people still had a hard time getting food. Even if you were well off, you had a hard time getting food.
Yeah. So, and if that is the case, really, like, then you're in big trouble. But, I think we'll see because there also depends on how much people believe the post-lockdown propaganda. Like, yes, it was bad, but it would have been so much worse had we not locked down. And of course, it's very hard to refute that because they're not doing like, a controlled study on this. So you can't, like, you either believe the government's perspective or propaganda that this was the best possible thing we could have done, or you don't believe it.
Yeah, I think they overshot a little bit when they started all the propaganda about how we have to stick with zero COVID because we care about the vulnerable. Like, did you see these Xinhua articles and stuff like that? They were like, well, China is sticking with zero COVID because we're protecting the most vulnerable people in our society. The
Communist Party cares about protecting the most vulnerable.
On the other hand,
like
you have
Uyghurs.
People literally people in Shanghai started keeping a log of everybody who had died during the lockdown. And a lot of people died through not being able to go to the hospital because they wouldn't let them out. So, people with kidney failure who needed dialysis, who couldn't get dialysis, people with cancer, people with heart problems. Like, there were dozens of these kinds of stories of people who are elderly and needed to go to the hospital and weren't allowed out to go to the hospital. There's scandals where, and this is another place where it kind of sounds like the things that happen in New York, people in like elderly care facilities, nursing homes, hospitals who are getting sick and dying, and no one like that was being kept quiet within the facilities, so people like didn't know that their relatives were dying. They couldn't reach people.
I'm just so glad we live in a country where, like, if an official did that, they'd be taken to task for it. There would be justice.
Well, I mean, I don't think you're going to see any justice in China, so it's not really.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm so glad we're in.
So, like, the Communist Party obviously likes to talk about protecting the vulnerable when what they're really doing is letting the weak and the sick die off.
I don't think they meant to.
No,
because I think that they it would be better for their propaganda if people didn't die, right? Because this is the thing that's undermining people in Shanghai, their belief that this is the best way.
Right.
But that is essentially the system that they've created, and the way that accountability works in that system is that you try to hide the bad stuff that's happening as much as possible.
Well, because it is like a nightmare bureaucracy. It's like that movie Brazil. Like, it's not like all of these like horrible things that happened are like specifically planned, although the party certainly does have many like intentional kills under its belt. It's just like some decision is made and there's this whole bureaucratic process, and then like people suffer. Like the woman who got stuck on a bridge between two cities that shut down.
I mean, there were phone calls that were leaked of people at the Shanghai CDC talking about how frustrated they were and like calling this a whole political thing, and it's not about people's health. You had low-level officials, like people who are in charge of neighborhood committees or something like that, crying on the phone because they couldn't. There's nobody that could call. They're responsible at the very basic level, like at the neighborhood level, for implementing some of these things or trying to get food to people on the stuff, and they can't reach anybody. There's literally the emergency numbers in Shanghai. Nobody was answering the phone. I mean, this is not happening for a month, but there were days where nobody was answering the phone. So if you had like 911, you're calling 911 and nobody answers. Like,
pretty crazy.
Yeah, so that's the situation. So I think a lot of people's confidence in the party was definitely shattered. And then when the party pushes the propaganda that's like, we're protecting people who are vulnerable, then that makes people even more angry, right?
Well, this is like a fundamental issue with like the idea of like, sort of like a free society versus like socialism and communism. Like the party portrays itself as like super capable, that it can handle all of society, when it obviously can't, versus, just like letting people actually govern themselves. Like there's an appeal to have like, the smart people, the experts, they're going to handle everything so much better than like just trusting, Joe Blow down the street who's an idiot.
Well, I think that is the mistake that a lot of people make with the Communist Party. They only see the propaganda and they're like, oh, China is led by engineers and technocrats and people who...
A meritocracy.
Like, yes, they're gonna... And it's because you don't see the stories. They've so well stopped any of that news from getting out. But things like Shanghai, it makes it easier to see.
Yeah, and even very capable people can be subject to the whims of politics, or they can just make stupid mistakes.
And politics in China is the most important thing. Like the political decrees by the Chinese Communist Party, those are the things that have to be followed. So a lot of the more ridiculous things that happened in Shanghai actually happened after Vice Premier Sun Chunlan, who's been in charge, quote unquote, of China's COVID lockdowns. Like she is the one that always comes. Xi Jinping's not going to come to Shanghai and inspect the lockdown, right? He doesn't want to get COVID. So they send Sun Chunlan around to, and wherever she goes, harsher lockdowns follow because that is the policy, right? So she goes around saying like, you need to lock down harder. And then you have ridiculous things like them putting up all these green fences everywhere in front of buildings, in front of people's doors. Have you seen this? Like
green fences? What is that?
They're colored green. So they're fences.
So they block COVID.
It's fencing.
I believe it.
It's fencing that's green, and they're just like fencing off streets, fencing off people's doorways. Like, and it's not clear what the fencing is supposed to do. People were already locked down, right?
It doesn't matter what it's for. They're doing something, Shelley.
There are reports that like people in districts where people were testing negative, people were being moved out of their apartment buildings so they could disinfect quote unquote, the apartment buildings, some people were moved to different provinces. And like people are like, why is this happening? Nobody knows why this is the policy, right? And they're spreading lime powder in the streets. Like it's just all this stuff that's for show, to like show that they're doing it harder now, right? Like they're following the policy.
I saw this video of like this old lady who got back from a quarantine camp, and she goes inside. She's welcomed back inside her apartment complex, and like a guy just like holds up a disinfectant thing and like sprays her full blast in the face.
That's not how it works.
Yeah, my theory about this whole COVID thing is it's like the top leadership of the Communist Party wants to implement zero COVID, not because they think it's the best overall policy, but because I actually think that the leadership is scared of getting COVID themselves. Like, a lot of disasters, they really don't affect the elite, but a disease that can spread presumably through the air is the scariest thing because it kind of affects everyone equally, no matter what your status or wealth is. And so because of that terror that, we who are supposed to be insulated from all the things that the poor people go through, like we could get this too. And so they're just so terrified of it that they're implementing these insane policies. And I think for that almost like weirdly selfish reason is why we're seeing China's whole zero COVID thing.
I mean, I believe that Xi Jinping is afraid of getting COVID. He's not left the country in 2 years. But I think also...
Now's the time.
Well, I think...
Go to a country that's been past COVID, Xi Jinping. Come to America.
Maybe, Chris, you can finally get your interview with
Xi.
Yeah. But no, what I was going to say is I think another reason, though, is because the system is set up for something like zero COVID.
Right.
Right. The system is set up for a top-down like control of people, of movement, of like that's you have the neighborhood committees who are already there. They weren't set up for COVID control, right? You've had neighborhood committees since the time of Mao. They were just there to
be the
report
eyes and ears of the party.
to report on people and make sure that everybody's studying the Little Red Book and nobody's having counter-revolutionary thoughts. I mean, about a dozen years ago, they started this grid management system of the city. So it's like this, the bureaucracy is set up for this. It is set up to be able to control people's movement. They had the QR codes, the health codes, which is not like a vaccine passport. It doesn't show you whether it shows you a red, yellow, or green. And if you're red, you can't leave.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're yellow, your movement is restricted to certain places. You can't go inside certain stores or whatever. If you're green, you can go places. So it is movement restriction. It is not,
right. Since they have the tool to control everything, they might as well use that tool. Like they just see that. Whereas another country, like, a lot of African countries are like, yeah, we don't have the resources to do any of this, so we're just going to kind of let it run its course. And that comes with its own problems too. But like, I'm just talking about the difference in mentality. Like when you don't have the tools to try to control everything, you just don't try to control everything. And then at least you don't get the problems that come with excessive amounts of control.
When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
I could have just said that.
I do also think that there's an interesting part of this which is the economic part of the COVID control.
Oh,
Because, think about all that. You've seen the people, all the pandemic workers wearing like the full body PPE suits, right?
Yeah.
In China, they call those people dabai, like the big whites.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody's just like wearing those white suits. Like they manufactured those suits. That adds to the GDP. They're testing, tens of millions of people, like all of the making swabs, making tests, running tests, that all adds to the GDP. Like they've built this little COVID economy almost out of everything that goes into like maintaining this type of zero COVID system. And an interesting thing is, who the people are inside those white suits?
I do, because you told me.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I don't know, Shelley. Who are they?
they're migrant workers. They're not they're not nurses and doctors. They're not police. Like, at first I thought that a lot of the people doing the kind of some of the security work were police officers or something like that. And the people who are testing people had some kind of like health qualifications. But no, the majority of the people in these, I mean, if you do have some doctors and nurses and things like that, but the majority of people testing people, enforcing all these COVID policies, disinfecting, etc., they're all working at the quarantine camps. They're all migrant workers.
Yeah, well, because they're poor and they have no power. So if they get sick, like, no big deal, right?
There's no, say, like the factories are shut, right? There's no, they maybe used to do sales, like door-to-door sales, or you used to do construction, or all of that's shut down. You don't have any choice. You'd be like a delivery driver, a pandemic worker, or something like that.
It's the new COVID economy, like you're saying.
Yeah, so you have all of these migrant workers going around. Essentially, they're the ones that have to enforce the policies. And if they get sick, they get quarantined in their own migrant worker camps. People were posting some of the videos of the camps, like literally people in tents out on the street because the dorm was supposed to be disinfected or something like that. People in container, like, it just.
It's like China's one big, like, what was that? The prison experiment.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
It's the Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah, that's the one. It's like that. That's what China is.
yeah. The whole thing is just mind blowing.
Yeah, but yeah, the economics of this lockdown has been insane. Besides, like, the global effect this is going to have, with the world's largest shipping container port being in Shanghai, and that's even though they're keeping that operating, like the fact that the transportation to the port has been basically cut off. This is going to have a huge global repercussion, but also, like, China Central Bank is back at manipulating its currency again to deal with the economic slowdown of this. They need, because industry has been so affected, they need cheap energy, so they've announced they're gonna be pushing coal more. So going back to that green energy thing, like the ripple effect of this is going to be tremendous.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to see the shipping. I don't think we're going to see the shipping effects here for a couple of months, but then we're going to start seeing what happened last summer, right?
If only Americans had used the first 2 years of COVID to pull out of China and disconnect from that segment of the economy.
Well, it's not that easy. But
I know, but 2 years is enough time to make substantial progress. And we didn't do it. We didn't even try.
Think about how much the U.S. economy changed almost overnight for World War II, the wartime economy. So it is possible to make vast economic change quickly. There just needs to be the will to do it.
I mean, we did make some changes, like look at all these companies that can now make masks in China, in the U.S., right?
But aren't those all going out of business because of cheap Chinese masks?
Well,
all over
that's
again?
the thing. Like, did we learn our lesson about that part of it?
No.
Yeah.
We did not learn. And then you have, a small number of gatekeepers. Like, for example, if Amazon had decided, you know what, we're going to stop offering Chinese products for sale on our platform, right? That would fundamentally change the game for everything. And if you could have a few big retailers like Amazon and, I don't know, whatever the next, 3 or 4 big competitors are, Walmart is probably up there. And just like you could change things fundamentally, and you'd give a huge boost to American manufacturing as well. But like there's no political pressure for them to do that. The media is not pressuring. Certainly the Washington Post is not going to encourage big companies to stop.
I mean, I don't know if that's the first step.
But it's a step, and you have to. It's a critical step, because if during World War II, American companies continued to support the Nazis. I mean, there were a lot of them that had IBM and whatnot, but like there was a certain point at which there was enough pressure that companies were like, okay, we're not going to be involved in this anymore. Then like it does make change, and we should have been there. It should have happened, and not not because, oh, the Communist Party is terrible, but just because it should be clear that economically it's a bad idea to be connected.
I don't think that's clear to people at all.
Well, so this ties into a topic I wanted to bring up today, that everything does kind of depend on the messaging to Americans about China. And, this week, the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, was on 60 Minutes. And, I think he has done a very good job over the years of like specifically trying to tell the American people that, the Chinese Communist Party, and he specifically singles out the Chinese Communist Party, not just China, is, a huge threat to the U.S. We can play a little segment of that clip.
The biggest threat we face as a country from a counterintelligence perspective is from the People's Republic of China, and especially the Chinese Communist Party. No country presents a broader, more severe threat to our ideas, our innovation, our economic security than China. And they are targeting our innovation, our trade secrets, our intellectual property on a scale that's unprecedented in history. They have a bigger hacking program than that of every other major nation combined. They have stolen more of Americans' personal and corporate data than every nation combined.
And so, I think this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about there needs to be, the U.S. government and all of its various branches needs to be messaging to the American people to let them know that this is a problem. Because otherwise, people might not know, especially with Elon Musk strangling the life out of Twitter now.
Well, I think it can't just be the U.S. government, right?
No, it needs to be brave YouTubers.
Yes, we're going to turn the tide.
It should be the media in general that kind of understand it, because it really shouldn't matter what your view on U.S. political issues is. Like there's lots of reasons to not to pull manufacturing and that economic relationship out of China. The least of which is what we talked about, which is China's massive pollution and being powered by a coal grid, which is putting so much carbon into the atmosphere that if you're concerned about man-made climate change, like why on earth are you buying stuff that's manufactured in China?
I'd prefer if you use the term woman-made climate change. Be a little more person include.
Unbelievable, Chris.
I'm trying to make my conversations more like Twitter.
I hate you.
There we go. It's just like Twitter. But I do think that the media is a big problem in terms of they don't really want to talk about this. Wall Street's another big problem. There was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal recently about Wall Street's Shanghai problem, because Shanghai is a huge business sector in China, right? So suddenly you have people who work in finance, like Americans who work in finance in Shanghai, being like, oh, I have to be locked in my apartment for 6 weeks. Like, what's happening?
Well, that goes back to the people who don't really feel the Communist Party's persecution are feeling it.
Yeah. So there's been some talk about expats leaving China. Actually, that might be backed up because people are talking about, like international schools, all the teachers are going, like you could see like a big move out of China. There's also talk of Chinese people leaving, but it's kind of like the going to Canada thing.
Yeah.
Some people are going to say it and not actually go.
Well, I think there is reason to be hopeful. Like recently there was a new poll by, I believe, Morning Consult that showed that the majority of Americans across party lines are supportive of like trade tariffs on China, and that the majority of Americans would vote for a politician who would continue these kind of tough on China policies.
It was like 70% plus.
Yeah, it was a big majority, and like roughly those numbers for Republican, Democrat, Independent. And so this really is the result of, I think, successful messaging to the American people. Let them know, like, oh, this is a problem. Because the problem had been going on for decades, but now people finally are catching on.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that, the Chinese Communist Party's actions have helped in the last 2 years.
And I think that China Uncensored and China Unscripted have really led the way.
I think so, too.
Sure.
So thank you for watching this episode of China Unscripted. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley John.
And I'm Matt Ganejda.
And we'll talk to you next time.